Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's story is one you won't want to miss. It's a deep dive into trust, boundaries, and betrayal. Imagine discovering that someone you love has been secretly recording you for months. How would you handle it? Let's dive in and see how our storyteller navigates this shocking discovery. I'd been dating Lily for almost 2 years. We met through mutual friends and things started off great. She was smart, funny, and had this attentive way of listening that made me feel understood. In fact, one of the things I appreciated about her was how interested she always seemed in everything I had to say. It felt like she was truly invested in me and our relationship. In the beginning, everything was perfect. We shared our dreams, our struggles, and had long talks about everything under the sun. I felt like I'd finally found someone who was both a partner and a best friend. We spent nearly every weekend together, either at her apartment or mine. She'd always cook these incredible meals and we'd spend hours just talking afterward. I couldn't imagine that this woman, who seemed so caring, could hide something so unsettling. One evening, a few months ago, I noticed a strange buzzing sound coming from Lily's bedroom. We were watching a movie in her living room, and she had just stepped out to take a call. Thinking it might be her phone vibrating, I followed the sound into her room to turn it off for her. But as I entered, I realized it wasn't her phone making the noise. It was a small recording device tucked behind her bedside lamp. At first, I thought maybe she'd bought it for some personal reason, maybe for studying or something. But the more I looked around, the more I noticed odd things in her room, subtle hints of electronics tucked into corners, almost hidden but just visible if you looked closely. I started looking more carefully and, to my shock, found 2 more recording devices, one behind her dresser and another taped under her desk. My mind was racing. Why on earth would Lily need multiple recording devices in her room? It made no sense, and it definitely didn't feel right. I tried to brush it off, but as I sat there, holding one of the devices, I realized that I couldn't just ignore it. Something told me there was more to this. The next day, I casually brought up the topic as we were having coffee. I held out the recording device and asked, "Hey, what's this doing in your room?" expecting her to laugh and tell me it was some odd project. But she didn't laugh. She froze, her face turning pale. She tried to shrug it off, saying something like, "Oh, that's just an old thing I had lying around." I must have forgotten about it. Her voice sounded shaky, and I could tell she wasn't being honest. So I asked her again more directly, "Why do you have multiple recording devices in your room? Are you recording us?" At that point, she couldn't keep up the act anymore. She took a deep breath and finally admitted it. "Okay, fine, I was recording us. But it's not as creepy as it sounds." She quickly tried to justify herself, saying that she'd been recording our conversations for months. Because she thought it would be a way to capture memories. She said she wanted to have a record of our relationship, to save the good times so we could look back on them someday. But something about her explanation felt incredibly off. Who hides recording devices all over their room just to capture memories, and without telling me? I pressed her for more, and that's when the truth came out. She admitted that she'd been struggling with trust issues, especially after her last boyfriend cheated on her. She said she'd started having doubts about me too, especially when I began staying late at work. Instead of talking to me about her fears, she thought secretly recording our conversations would be her way of protecting herself. She wanted to make sure I wasn't hiding anything from her, and this was her way of doing it. As she kept explaining, I felt my chest tighten. I couldn't believe that the woman I trusted so deeply had been listening in on everything: private conversations, my random thoughts, even quiet moments I thought were just for me. I asked her how long she'd been doing this, and she admitted that she'd started about 6 months into our relationship. So for over a year, she'd been secretly recording me, cataloging every word, every laugh, every private moment. The worst part, she admitted that she'd even listened to conversations I'd had with my friends and family when they came over. Conversations where we talked about private issues, family stuff, job frustrations, and personal struggles. She'd heard all of it. And yet she hadn't found anything that would prove I was being unfaithful or dishonest. All that paranoia, all those hours of listening, had revealed nothing but normal, everyday life. I was in shock. I told her I needed some space and left her apartment. Over the next few days, I felt a whirlwind of emotions: anger, hurt, betrayal, confusion. Lily tried to reach out constantly, bombarding me with messages, apologizing over and over. She promised she'd delete every recording and that she would never do anything like this again. She even offered to let me look through her devices to prove that she hadn't shared anything with anyone else. But the trust was shattered. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that our relationship had been tainted by her insecurities. I kept imagining all the times I thought we were alone, private, just the two of us, only to realize that she'd been turning our time together into data, reviewing it, dissecting it for signs that I might be lying or hiding something. It felt like I'd been living under surveillance. A week later, she came to my apartment, begging me to forgive her. She told me she'd go to therapy, that she'd work on her issues, that she'd do anything to make it up to me. And while I believed that she was genuinely sorry, I knew that I couldn't get past this. The person I thought was my confidant had become someone I couldn't trust. I told her that, as much as it hurt, I couldn't continue in a relationship where my privacy wasn't respected. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made, but I knew I needed to move on and find someone who would trust me without needing proof. Looking back, it's still surreal. I'd shared so much of myself with her, but she was the one hiding secrets all along. Now I'm working on rebuilding my own sense of trust, and I know one thing for sure: relationships can't survive without it. Thanks for sticking around to the end. This story really shows how important trust is in any relationship. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted crossed the line? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until next time.